Did you know that Verstappen's telemetry data put McLaren on alert just before qualifying in Singapore? What seemed like a simple Friday practice session has turned into a revelation that could change the course of the championship. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, do you think Verstappen will finally break the Singapore curse? The big question is, what did Red Bull discover in the RB21 that left McLaren worried just hours before qualifying? Stay until the end, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Singapore Grand Prix has always been one of the most unforgiving venues on the Formula One calendar, and for Max Verstappen, it represents a very particular challenge. Despite having dominated multiple circuits in different conditions and becoming the absolute benchmark of the modern era, Singapore has remained a thorn in his side. 8 attempts, multiple opportunities, and different Red Bull setups haven't been enough to break the barrier that separates him from a victory at Marina Bay. This statistic weighs more than it seems, because in Formula One, psychological confidence plays as decisive a role as pure speed. For Verstappen, arriving in Singapore with a real chance of reversing that trend isn't just a matter of points. It's the opportunity to show that no territory can resist him. Furthermore, the 2025 Singapore Grand Prix comes at a crucial moment in the championship. Red Bull has had to reinvent itself after a start to the season dominated by McLaren, which, with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, has achieved a suffocating consistency. 12 wins and 7 double podiums in just 17 races. This has put Verstappen and his team on the ropes, forcing them to accelerate their technical development in search of immediate answers. What in other years was an uncomfortable circuit for Red Bull has now become the last great opportunity to strike a strategic blow and close the gap in the fight for the title. Friday's free practice in Singapore made it clear that the battle between Red Bull and McLaren is much closer than many imagined. The telemetry collected during those early sessions revealed key information that quickly caught the paddock's attention. Verstappen's RB21, despite the improvements made, still showed a deficit at very specific points on the track. In the final sector, characterized by medium and low-speed corners that demand precision and stability from the car, the Dutchman lost around 0.146 seconds to Oscar Piastri. Most worrying for Red Bull is that the loss wasn't isolated, but rather consistent in turns 5 and 18, where a gap of a tenth and a half was repeated, which, on a circuit as difficult for overtaking as Marina Bay, could prove decisive in qualifying. However, the data wasn't solely negative for Verstappen. In the race simulations, where the car's behavior was analyzed with a higher fuel load and greater degradation, the picture changed. Against all odds, Verstappen managed to be faster than Piastri, averaging a 0.134-second advantage per lap on long runs. This not only surprised analysts, but also set off alarm bells within McLaren. Historically, the Woking-based team has seen tire management and consistent race pace as one of its main strengths. That Red Bull, on a circuit so critical for degradation, has shown a preliminary advantage in this regard, suggests that the RB21 could be approaching a level of competitiveness it hadn't shown on other street circuits this year. Even so, engineers and strategists from all teams warned of a significant limitation. The data was obtained in sessions marked by interruptions. 2 red flags, caused by accidents involving George Russell and Liam Lawson, cut more than 20 minutes of running time in free practice too, leaving very little representative information to work with realistic fuel loads. This means that Verstappen's long-run advantage should be interpreted with caution, as without a complete sample of laps, averages can distort reality. Despite this, what was clear is that Red Bull, with its new aerodynamic and cooling solutions, managed to close part of the gap on McLaren and cast doubt on the Woking-based team's supposed superiority in the extreme conditions of Singapore. Red Bull's arrival in Singapore wasn't improvised or the result of a momentary reaction. The team worked intensively during the mini-break following the British Grand Prix to introduce a package of updates that they described as the last major development of the season. The RB21 debuted a completely redesigned front wing, with specific curvatures that increased downforce without excessively compromising drag. This improvement was essential at a track like Marina Bay, where downforce is key to surviving the medium and low-speed corners that abound on the circuit. Furthermore, Red Bull introduced an engine cover with wider and more efficient outlets, an innovation designed not only for engine cooling but also to stabilize aerodynamic flow, something that can make a difference in extreme conditions like those experienced in Singapore. Verstappen's statements after Friday's sessions reflected a measured but optimistic tone. The Dutchman acknowledged that the car had responded well from the start, but also made it clear that the team needed to find a little more pace if they wanted to challenge McLaren in qualifying. His technical comments focused directly on tire management, noting that front and rear grip was difficult to maintain during a flying lap with a tendency to overheat too quickly. This diagnosis is consistent with the historical pattern in Singapore, but also demonstrates the precision with which Verstappen analyzes every detail, aware that only a balanced car will allow him to squeeze the most out of a qualifying lap. Red Bull consultant Helmut Marko offered a more enthusiastic view, stating that it had been the best Friday in years in Singapore. According to him, the improvements solved problems that had hampered the team on this type of track, such as the car's behavior on the curbs and constant understeer in slow corners. The difference with previous seasons is noticeable. Verstappen no longer complains about the car bouncing like a kangaroo, but instead shows greater confidence in attacking the limits of a circuit. This change is no small feat. It's evidence that Red Bull has managed to regain the platform stability it had lost on street circuits, and which now places the RB21 at a competitive level much closer to McLaren's. At this point, Red Bull's position is understood as that of a team that, after months of uncertainty, has found a clear direction to regain competitiveness. On the one hand, they remain cautious in acknowledging that they still don't have a guaranteed fastest lap against McLaren. On the other, they know that on long runs the car has shown promising signs that hadn't been seen before in Singapore. If Red Bull manages to transform the positive signals from practice into a solid performance during qualifying and the race, the consequences could be enormous for both the championship and the psychological dynamics of the season. For starters, winning in Singapore would have an immediate symbolic impact. Verstappen would break one of his most notorious curses, cementing the idea that there is no circuit where he cannot win. That emotional blow, beyond the points, would send a direct message to McLaren and the rest of the field. The Dutchman remains the rival to beat and is ready to resurface in the toughest scenarios. On a sporting level, a Verstappen victory at Marina Bay would completely alter the balance of power in the championship. McLaren has built its dominance on consistency and confidence in its car, but losing on a track where they have historically been strongest would mean losing psychological and strategic ground. Furthermore, with the Constructors' Championship practically in their grasp, McLaren's true objective is to secure the driver's title. If Verstappen manages to close the gap in Singapore, it will force Piastri and Norris to live with constant pressure in each remaining Grand Prix, knowing that any mistake could be exploited by a recovering Red Bull. The consequences also extend to the strategic realm. Red Bull has decided to invest its resources in these specific improvements for Marina Bay, and if they pay off, the team will have justified the investment of capital and time at a key time of the year. This could motivate the team to continue fine-tuning small details in the upcoming races, knowing they have the ability to compete for wins again. For McLaren, however, a setback in Singapore would force them to rethink their risk-taking strategy. Until now, they could afford to manage the advantage, but if Red Bull threatens to consistently cut points, they could be forced to take stronger risks in qualifying and make more aggressive decisions in the race. The immediate scenario for Red Bull and McLaren focuses on Saturday's qualifying, which always takes on special importance in Singapore. Unlike other circuits, where a smart strategy can compensate for a poor grid position, Marina Bay is famous for its difficulty in overtaking. 10 of the last 15 races held here have been decided virtually by pole position, meaning any deficit on the fastest lap can be irreparable. Therefore, although Red Bull has shown promising pace on long runs, the big question remains whether Verstappen can squeeze enough out of the RB21 to compete head-to-head with McLaren on a flying lap. In the coming hours, Red Bull is expected to fine-tune its setup to find that fine balance that will allow it to reduce losses in the final sector, the critical point where McLaren maintains its advantage. The RB21's performance window remains narrow, and that requires surgical setup work. Any error in tire temperature management or aerodynamic balance could leave Verstappen off the front row, complicating his chances at a circuit where traffic management and pit stop strategy rarely offer clear comeback opportunities. Still, the fact that Verstappen has expressed satisfaction with the car's foundation shows that Red Bull is arriving with a higher level of confidence than in previous years. The other key factor in the short term will be thermal management, both for the car and the drivers. With the first official heat hazard warning issued by the FIA, all teams are facing extreme temperatures and humidity. Red Bull appears to have found an advantage in this regard with its redesigned engine cover, which offers more efficient cooling without any obvious aerodynamic penalty. If this innovation works as expected, they could have an extra margin in the race over McLaren, which has so far managed tire degradation better. But the truth is, no one knows exactly how the cars will respond in a race that could exceed 2 hours in extreme conditions. The telemetry data and Verstappen's feedback confirm that Red Bull has managed to make a qualitative leap forward just when it needed it most. The deficit in the corners of the final sector still exists, but the long-run pace and the improvements made to the RB21 show that the gap to McLaren is no longer insurmountable. This completely changes the script of a championship that seemed dominated from start to finish by the Woking team and puts Verstappen back in the spotlight as a real contender in the title fight. Now it's your turn. Do you think Verstappen can conquer Singapore for the first time and completely turn the championship around? Or do you think McLaren will continue to demonstrate its superiority and withstand the pressure? Leave me your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.